Hey guys, welcome back to the TEG Podcast. Today's topic, do you ever actually stop being a gamer? Before we can get started, I think we need a little explanation about what we're actually talking about here. For anybody who's past their teenage years would know, the older you get, usually the less time you have for the things you actually enjoy and want to do. Because of that, there's a lot less time for gaming. So do people who stop playing games actually stop being gamers, including if you stop playing games entirely? And that's kind of what we want to discuss. But it's hard to figure that out without setting some ground rules. So we're going to be talking about this in a three-part way. The first part is we're going to be defining what does it actually mean to be a gamer. The second part is we're going to talk about the evidence for the idea that you keep your identity, and then the evidence against that idea, that you actually can lose that identity as part of yourself. If you're watching this, you're probably in the camp of being a gamer yourself. And I wonder if you've ever thought about this if you play less games than you used to. If you haven't thought about this before, you can substitute it for anything else that you may be interested in. Movies, athletics, whatever the case is. But before we jump into any further, let's introduce ourselves and talk about why we have a personal connection to this message. First, I'll go up. I'm Josh. I'm the host of this channel. I played games all throughout childhood, just like any kid normally does. As I've grown up, though, I've had a lot more professional interaction with gaming. Anything from trying to do more speedruns to being a paid professional gamer on YouTube, like long time ago, even to today where I'm an esports coach for a high school. In fact, fun fact, none of my esports players are yet better than me at Smash Bros, which either means that I am an incredible player or a terrible coach. You decide. And that's my connection to the topic. But I'm also a father, and in the last several years, I've gotten married, started my career, and have 2 kids. I play a lot less than I used to, and I have to ask myself this question a lot. Now, let's introduce to the other two. Joseph, why don't you go first?
Hi, I'm Joseph, or Homerman76, as some might know me, and I think I wear my credibility a little more on the surface than my fellows, but I'm a huge gamer who big on like just gaming in general. It's a huge part of my life, and I'm hoping to get into streaming again, though it was a slow process because my previous laptop died.
Well, hopefully you can pick that back up then. Adam, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Adam. I've been a gamer since pretty much 1998 when Ocarina of Time came out. Been playing lots of Nintendo and branched out later on. I've been making games, my own games on the side. It's a huge passion of mine. I don't have as much time as I would like to now since I'm a father of 3 and I work full-time at a day job. But someday it's my dream to go full-time indie.
Sweet. So what's funny about our introductions is as we each introduced ourselves, it reminded me a lot of like an Alcoholics Anonymous like introduction, which is actually funny because that's been on my mind when we're going to talk about what it means to lose or keep that identity. But you guys are just like, yeah, my name's Adam. I've been gaming since I was 5, and so anyways, we're going to get to our first part now. So we need to define what it means to actually be a gamer. And obviously between each of us, we have lots of years under our belts, but there's lots of discussion about what it actually means. And I was talking with somebody about this yesterday. And when we were growing up on the playground, there seemed to be this idea of gamer gatekeeping. Like, oh, you're not a real gamer because you didn't sell your soul to the devil to get like a Nintendo 64 cartridge or something like that. But like, you know, where the actual discussion is what counts as being a gamer. Because in this day and age, everybody plays games. I'd be shocked to know of even a grandma who has never touched a game before. And people have games on their phones. They have games on consoles. They have games on their iPads. And so everybody plays games. So what does it mean to be a gamer? So I'll open it up to you guys. What is your first stance on this?
Well, I'll just say when you were talking about back in the day, really, most of the argument was the console wars of, oh, you play little kid Nintendo, how about play some Halo, yeah, on the Xbox. Xbox will totally outlive Nintendo and be way more popular than that 20 years from it. That did not happen. But
Womp womp.
But yeah, so for me, I mean, going off of like what Google says, because Google's never wrong. It says a gamer is a person who regularly plays video games, computer games, and even mentions tabletop games, which is kind of an interesting discussion because I don't know if that really counts as a video game, although there's a lot of overlap there in interest.
Yeah, I also dislike what Google is saying there. So I'm going to say Google's wrong because this is contrary to my point. I don't think being a gamer does have to do with how much time you play, but continue your point.
Yeah. So I think really it's do you play games? Is really the definition of gamer. However, there's a spectrum here. And when we say I'm a gamer, you mentioned, maybe your grandma has played a game like Candy Crush or something. Would your grandma consider herself to be a gamer? Probably not. But you could make an argument that she is because she technically plays games.
We're not going to play it both ways. You got to make the claim. You got to make the claim. Is grandma a gamer?
I think it's a spectrum. Because I think you can make the argument, yes, she's a gamer because she plays a game. But is she the same type of gamer that I am? No. I'm way more invested into it. I'm way more invested than she is probably.
So you're touching on an important principle.
I'm constantly thinking about it all the time. I'm obsessive. If I got in the conversation, they'd be like, okay, that's cool. And then they'd walk away because it's too much for them. You know what I mean? But like, I'm not going to say that, oh, you don't play any games, therefore you don't deserve to be, You don't need to be mean about it. But I do think it's important to make a distinction that there are different types of gamers. That's basically my claim, is there's different types of gamers.
I totally agree with the idea that there's different types of gamers. I myself am a challenge type gamer as opposed to somebody who plays open worlds. But at the same time, and there's casual versus hardcore. At the same time, though, I do not think that grandma would call herself a gamer. And I'm going to put a hard line here. I will say that in how people are like, oh yes, autism is a spectrum, which means we're all autistic. It's like, okay, so
honestly,
does autism exist?
A lot of truth to that.
Right? So I'm not trying to make fun of that idea at all.
Yeah.
Because I have high respect to all forms of like differentiation. I myself am diagnosed by my wife with something every week because she's certain that there's something wrong with me. Like
my wife too.
But mine claims ADHD, which is probably true. But anyways,
that's a whole other conversation. Yeah.
So if you say everybody is blank, you take the syndrome fallacy of like, well, when everybody's super, no one is, right? And so you can't just say everybody's a gamer. We're just different shades of gamers. This is not 50 Shades of Grey, right? This is like you are a gamer or are you are not. And the distinction is whether somebody else would say you are and whether you would say you are. Now we can talk about whether you or other people are correct, but grandma herself would not call herself a gamer.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to specify why. Because if you're going to be able to say that you lose or retain that identity, you need to have more than just saying we're all gamers in spirit.
Yep. I actually had some thoughts on that. Like my way of defining it is like, so basically a fan of gaming that builds much of their life around the appreciation of gaming, much like a sports fan or a connoisseur of art, film, or music, essentially. Like, cause like to be a fan, like it's a short form for a fanatic. Like it's, you are a fanatic about this, topic. And it's like enjoying mainstream content is not a bad thing by any means as far as like or like enjoying like kind of something short like Candy Crush. But like if you are a fan of something, would you really be a fan if you just stop at that one thing? Like Fortnite fans and Call of Duty fans or Candy Crush fans, like they play games and those are games. Like there's plenty of gamers who play those games, but to be a gamer and only play those games, there's a little bit of a problem there because that like if you're a fan, like is Fortnite really enough for you? And I mean, Fortnite is a weird spectrum just because like there's so much there, but like is Candy Crush really enough for you? Or like would you be interested in seeking out other types of games? Now, of course, if Fortnite is your entire life, it's kind of hard to argue that you're not a Fortnite gamer. But if you play Fortnite casually only when your friends are playing the game, that's when the problem comes up, where it's just like, but are you a gamer because all you do is on the occasion and stuff, much like it's like trying to claim, oh, I'm a gamer because I play Uno with my friends whenever we play, whenever they bring up Uno at a party. Yeah, I actually really like what you're saying here. If I can like add to it, so I thought of the analogy of what does it mean to be an athlete, right? We all played sports in elementary school because we were required to, and a lot of us play for fun when there's something going on to varying levels, right? But while I consider myself athletic, I do not consider myself an athlete, not because I couldn't be, but because I do not pursue it. Now, the idea of pursuit, I think, is somewhat important, but I think it's more along the lines of what you said, Joseph, about being a fan of something. To me, a gamer is somebody who has an invested part of their shared identity or culture that they can connect with either personally or with others. A good example of this is what you were saying with Call of Duty and Fortnite. When we were growing up on the playground and Joe would go home and on a rare occasion, he'd play Madden or he would play Call of Duty. It wasn't because Joe like pursued or was a fan of gaming or gaming culture or things like that. It was because he had time on his hands. And when he no longer had time on his hands, Joe didn't play anymore. Not because like he thought the games were bad. It's just, it wasn't his like pursuit or his fan or what he was a fan of. It was just something he used time on. Phone games are very similar, where phone games are used to use time. They can be interesting. Like we can all watch movies without being movie connoisseurs. And so I think in regards to what I think a gamer is do you, whether you play games or not, do you connect culturally or identity wise with other people who play games? And what do you think about that? Oh, that one's a huge one for me, because when it comes to like the idea of like connecting with games, that's a huge part of like where a lot of like games are for me. Like my top 3 games of all time: Trails of Cold Steel 2, Majora's Mask, and Final Fantasy VIII. Though like they aren't necessarily at the top because I actually think they are legitimately the best games of all time, although there's an argument to be made for Majora's Mask, rather because those are the games that I connected with on like just a more fundamental level, that like it helped to fundamentally shape my identity, like going towards the future. Like these were the games that like changed everything about my perspective on a number of things, because I connected with the worlds and stuff. And it doesn't have to be like a huge story invested game, because like some people, they get that connection with like Super Smash Brothers or something like that, where it's just it changes. It ends up being that shift and change where it's just to like kind of quote something from a game. Like it's like the moment in Haikyuu where Tsukishima, he wasn't really all that big of into like volleyball and all that. He was just kind of like, I'm like, what makes you all so interested with this game? Like, to me, this is just a club and all that. And they're like, well, it all changes when you get that one point that just changes everything for you. And then he gets it, and then he goes to the one match, blocks a shot from the character Ushiwaka, who is like a huge prominent spiker in the series. And that was the one moment that suddenly it was a switch for him. It went from, I'm not all that big on this game, to yes. And it changed everything about the sport for him. And that's a lot of like, and I think that's a huge like example to like what we're talking about. Like, we're just like, Tsukishima is that character of like, he, as you said, he was interested in volleyball. He dabbled in it because he was good at it, because his brother was interested in it. But it was just a club to start off with. And he didn't see any reason to invest any more than just that.
Yeah.
And then things changed.
Yeah. The transition between like a use of time to his culture.
Yeah, I missed a little bit of some of the things you said, but one thing that I really liked what you said, Josh, was about there should be a lot of emphasis put on the pursuit of what you're like, being an athlete's a really good example, because when in high school I did track and field. I ran the 800 meter dash race. And would I consider myself an athlete now? Heck no, because not only do I not don't pursue that anymore, but I'm definitely like way less in shape and way less healthy than I used to be. So it's, that definitely has changed. So I think the pursuit, I think there's a little bit more than pursuit. And I don't know if I can quite say what that is. Because then you'd have to define what does it mean to pursue in something. Does that mean playing it? Because again, grandma's playing Candy Crush. You could argue she's pursuing it. I think there has to be some level of interest and passion to a point where because the whole point of these labels is so you can identify yourself, so you can identify other people. And so you can meet, you can have a connection, Grandma's not very interested in talking to you about games, it's, yeah.
Yeah. I think you're actually really onto something there, Adam. The idea of labels is we use them so we can figure out what groups we fall into. Mm-hmm. And the reason that you group people, others, or group yourself is so you can know, like, you can associate with people that have that interest and that identity too. So when we use the word pursuit, I don't want to use that word much further. It's an aspect of it, but I think I would define a gamer as somebody who, like, gaming or gaming culture is part of their accepted identity. It's a group label that they would connect with. And we might push and pull on this a little bit. We might push and pull on this a little bit because we're going to start going into the second and third discussions, parts of the discussion, which is, does that mean you can or can't lose that? And we'll probably see holes in our definition. And probably our audience is even like, I don't agree with that. Yeah. But I think, would you guys agree that at least for now, we're going to move forward with the idea that you are considered a gamer if it is part of an identity or label that you willingly connect with?
Yep.
Yeah, I would agree with that because generally speaking, if someone's willing to call themselves a gamer, they probably are a gamer. However, it is important to note that umbrella, I got my dyslexia of talking. Gamer is definitely an umbrella term because there's many other subcategories of gamer under that,
Yeah. So let's push and pull on this definition. We're going to go for reasons that yes, you can keep that sense of gamer identity. And the first point I'm going to put forward to you guys to chew on is that gaming isn't the only way of being a gamer. Now, that sounds weird, but I think as you evolve in your life, the way you express that culture changes. For example, one of the things that I really appreciate that you can actually see in my background is that even though I don't play as much as I used to, I connect with the paraphernalia or the like artwork or the like discussion that comes with gaming. Heck, the fact that I'm even a part of this discussion right now shows that gaming is still a part of my identity, even though I don't play as much or as often as I used to. But the expression, if you are somebody who, like, let's say you don't have time to play anymore or you sold all your consoles, but every now and then you watch like a YouTube video on it, or when you like come to meet somebody and you find out you both grew up on Zelda and you like geek out over it for a second, even though you haven't played for several years, like to me, that is still like gaming is still a part of your identity, despite regardless of how much you have or haven't played recently.
It's always an interesting thing. So one thing I was like thinking about with regards to the arguments for like for the idea that you don't lose that part of your identity is or like just because that you don't especially if you just because you don't like start gaming, is like, what if you're say in a position where you just physically can't anymore? Like, let's say, like, not just like you just don't have time for it, but like, let's say that like you just straight up
you lost your hands.
Like that's what I was gonna say. Like you lost the use of your hands. Like you still want to be involved with gaming culture. So you live it through other people by like watching streams, sharing with it. You still embrace all that like information and all that. But on the other flip side, like let's say for you both, your situations, let's say you don't really play games anymore. You don't really interact. You're a parent who just doesn't have time to like keep up with the latest trends on gaming and stuff. But you do still live it through your kids and stuff. You every time, like a good example is my our own dad. Like for Joshua and I, like he is in like that cusp of like, is he still a gamer? Or even like our childhood was built around like watching him play Ocarina of Time, Link to the Past, and all of those like a lot of Legend of Zelda especially. But some Mario games, to the point like we weren't allowed to play unless he had beaten the game first. But at the same time, like even though he doesn't like play games as much as he used to, mostly because he doesn't have time, but a lot of it also because he doesn't have like the energy and other such things. And like a lot of games have just become a lot more complicated than what he prefers. But I wouldn't necessarily rule him out as a gamer, because even then he still engages with it through us on occasion. Like he loves hearing about where things have gone with Legend of Zelda and like his some of his favorite stuff, or talking about this game thing with Nintendo, or that thing with Nintendo and stuff like. And so even though he's not necessarily a gamer, he depending on how you like look at it, he has never lost the identity of one because he lives it through us, his kids.
Yeah. Which is interesting because he kind of pushes and pulls on this definition that we gave, because he was never as engrossed in the culture as we were. Like he would play from time to time, primarily Legend of Zelda when it would come out. The last one, for audience sake, by the way, the last one he ever played was Twilight Princess. No, actually, no, he did try a little bit.
That's a good place to stop right there. Try
he tried with Skyward Sword. He just couldn't get into it with the motion controls.
The motion controls.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because he was never as into it. He liked it. But I think the level of interest he had then has retained to now. Obviously, he doesn't play in the same level he used to, but the level that he wants to find out about what's happening with Zelda and all those things since then has remained consistent. So he actually would be a good evidence that you do retain your gamer identity, and whether or not you would call him a gamer is actually not important to the concept that he has retained whatever level gamer identity he did have. Now, I think that's true for a lot of people. I couldn't say for everyone. I do want to push on this a little bit because one of the
you're good.
Oh, did you want to go first? I have an interesting
I have
point,
a thought off of that. So I think it's interesting. So I don't know your dad's situation the whole way through, but the games were very different. So focusing in on the Legend of Zelda series, the games were very different after that. A Skyward Sword, you could argue, is similar, but really it was a very different type of linear experience. That's when the overworld was very dungeon-like, And then Breath of the Wild went completely in the opposite direction, where there's essentially, it was just everything's non-linear, and there's multiple answers to there's many solutions to many puzzles, whatever. The thing is, Twilight Princess, those games aren't made anymore. There are none of those. And so if a game like that was made again, would your dad play it? So my point here is, a lot of times your gamer identity can be dependent on what's available to you that pertains to your interests. If games that you like are no longer, if you have a very narrow interest, and those games are no longer being made, it's very likely you're going to drift apart, because Zelda today is not the same as Zelda was before. Some people fit in both of them nicely, and that's great, I even appreciate the newer Zeldas, even though I'm more of a fan of the older ones. I still can see what they do, and I can appreciate them. But they are different. And the confusion here is, they're both called Zelda, therefore they're the same, but they're not really the same. So yeah. Anyway, that's the thought that I had.
I agree with you there, because I haven't played a new Zelda game since. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. I haven't played any new Zelda games since A Link Between Worlds. Love that game, but I didn't play Skyward Sword. I didn't play Breath of the Wild. I tried, don't like it. I'm not a huge open world person. Certainly have not played Tears of the Kingdom. I did play the remake for Link's Awakening. Thought that was great, but I don't know if that counts since it's a remake of an older one. But I still play some of the older Zeldas. And my interest in gaming is broader than just Zelda. But it is true that my interest in Zelda, though it's very high, has waned in terms of the playing of it. Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned that if somebody has a very narrow interest of gaming, then they might kind of age out of it. And there's like similar ones. Like I love modern games like Hollow Knight that take on the approximation of like older games. But somebody who like really identified in their childhood with like Spyro has had like a difficult last 20 years.
Yeah.
They're making a new Spyros, apparently.
But
Toys
the
for
gamer
Bob
identity, that interest has not left. So I think this all validates what we've been saying. I want to push back a little bit on it though.
Do you want to go, or because I was going to say
yeah.
Okay, you go.
No, I guess go ahead.
Oh, I'll go. I was saying it also goes in the opposite direction too, to where if we go backwards in time, there were fewer genres because technology was limited. But like now, there's a much more broader interest. There's like Stardew Valley is a huge game that, I mean, yes, there is technically fighting, but really it's about growing a farm. And back in the 80s, there really wasn't a game like that. So anyone who would have had that interest, that's unavailable to them. So what I'm trying to say is goes in the opposite direction too. Sorry to interrupt your thought earlier.
There is one irony of gaming, which is like, as much as it kind of like spread out at some point, it also is starting to like slowly kind of
converge,
close back into like almost a singular, it's not like one singular point, but like into like a very restricted format. Like, and we're seeing that a lot with like how many games
AAAs
are like incorporating open world as like the new thing. And like it just, and like a lot of people are in this phase of like, this is where games have to go. And that is a very scary phrase.
This is why
I do think I do want to redirect though. I do want to redirect because this is a very interesting discussion, but not necessarily to the discussion we're having right now. I will say that another time that begs the question of like, why has indie games become so popular? And that is part of the reason. But returning to what we're talking about now, what that has to do with whether or not you can lose your gamer identity is we're simply saying that the types of games out there shifts. And you may have your interests currently being out there in the media, or maybe it's not as available. But your gamer identity does not lessen only just because you haven't had recent games. And a really good example of this is nostalgia. Yeah. So I had a manager when I was in high school, when I was working at Sonic, of all places. He was convinced that the golden era of games was Super Nintendo. And I think that's fine. The reason he was all about that is usually you cling to whatever era you grew up with at a very like a pivotal time in your life. That's why I like the 64 so much. And B, he loves RPGs. And RPGs were very standard, I would say, in the Super Nintendo era. So for example, you have things like Super Mario RPG, or a lot of Final Fantasies or Final Fantasy likes that came out around that time. Earthbound, totally. And they had very similar systems. And so for somebody who liked that system, they think that's the best ever. And we have RPGs today, but they're very different. The Final Fantasy remake for Final Fantasy VII, fantastic game in my opinion, but very different. So somebody who liked it back then may not like the current one, but they're not less of a gamer just because they're very nostalgic for the way things used to be. Because as we defined before, that is still part of their like identity and culture that they would happily geek out with somebody if somebody wanted to talk about Super Mario RPG.
No, I will have to go back to this point because I do have a counterpoint. But we'll get to that once we get to the next section.
Oh, go ahead. I want to transition to there anyway. I have one point for counter as well, but I'd love to hear yours first.
Yeah. So regarding this topic, like I actually had a thought regarding all of this as well, where it's just like, so there is a caveat to this thing. Like it's not a bad thing to be very nostalgic for things, but to kind of like throw, like let's say Pokemon as another like option where it's just like, if you are someone who hasn't touched a Pokemon game in decades or something like that, and you are still in that boat of like, well, I'm like Gen 4 or something like that is the best. Gen 1, it was
Gen 3.
All these other games are just Gen 3 or Gen 2 or whatever your choice is. Like, but these newer games, they're all just so bad. But you haven't touched a Pokemon game, again, like say in decades or something like that. Which sadly, like all of those gens I mentioned, I'm pretty sure are actually in that decades area because it's been like what at least 20 years since Gen 4. It might make you feel old. Anyways,
that's
but
crazy. It has been 20 years,
like
right?
if you're in that boat and you are saying, "Oh, well, these new games are just so bad," and stuff, are you really just nostalgic for games and therefore a nostalgic gamer, or are you just that crotchety old man going, "Back in my day"?
You're Cranky Kong from Donkey Kong Country.
Regardless of whether or not you like the modern ones or the old ones, and you're not willing to adapt to the new ones, I think it is a moot point for our discussion here because you're still a gamer. Like you are still participating in gamer discussions. You are still embracing that part of the culture. Like,
so my point's more to the area of like you are criticizing the new, not because you actually are still a part of that culture, but because you just don't like that it's different from how it used to be, and you're critical and stuff. Because like it's kind of like how there are people who go onto like certain series just to hate on them and all that. They're not a fan of that series. They're just people who are angry.
It depends because sometimes there can be valid reasons. I think what Josh was saying, though, and I agree, is that chances are, if they're bothering to enter in a conversation like this, they probably care about it, and that makes them a gamer to some extent. Now, talk about that umbrella term. They're obviously not, in this case, they're not a modern Pokemon fan.
And I think being particular is not the same thing as not being a gamer. Like being a gamer is not the idea that you appreciate all games. I don't appreciate all games. Nobody that I know appreciates all games. You could probably be some sort of hippie and be like, all art is good art. But
I'll push back on that because I think I have a different perspective here. So I make games, okay? I'm working on making a game now. I have a very different perspective when looking at games, even if a game's bad. Now, if it's like a series I care about, I'll be much more like invested and critical. And like I've always been very critical over Tears of the Kingdom, even though honestly, it's really not a bad game. It just did not meet my expectations, even within what it set up within itself. But anyway, I look at games of how they are made and how I appreciate the craft.
Sure.
So even if a game sucks, I'm sure there's something I could pull from it and appreciate. Not so much from like, wow, I really enjoy this. It's like, oh, wow, why does this food taste so bad? I need to figure out what they did to mess it up. So like, I think from that perspective, that's the case. And here's the thing. If I wasn't so interested in making games, there's a good chance I might not even play some modern Nintendo series. But because I like being in the loop, I like knowing what's happening, I try to stay up to date to what's going on in the gaming sphere because it's good to have multiple perspectives. But if I wasn't making a game, who cares? If I'm just doing it for my self-interest, why would I care about that?
I'll retract my statement then about like there's nobody who appreciates all games because clearly you appreciate all games in some way. Though I think after this, I would be willing to have a conversation and disprove that you appreciate all games.
I'm sure you can come up with a game that would make me be like, oh no, I hate that game. But
the point though is it's not important whether or not you have to like all games. All I'm trying to say is that you do not have to like all games to be a gamer.
Yeah.
Like, gaming is a huge umbrella. It's like you can say I love movies without saying you love all movies. And you can say that you love horror movies and still be a film like connoisseur, so to speak. But to go back to the example of like Gen 1ers for Pokemon, there's people out there who are like only the first 151 Pokemon count. And one of them is my friends. And it's like, I don't understand why you have that position. But at the same time, if you still have an opinion about gaming that you care to defend, and like you still get excited to talk about that topic, you still have that culture. So to truly not be a gamer has nothing to do with what preferences you have on games. Nothing at all to do with it. You could only play Madden. You could only play Call of Duty. You could only play the dumbest game possible. Not that those are dumb. I'm just saying like you could think Goat Simulator is like the only game you ever need, but it doesn't matter. at the end of the day, if you partake in gaming culture and that is retained in you, then you're a gamer. Now, here's the counterpoint.
Could I bring up one last scenario? Like just to clear up one thought on this process. So let's say we have a scenario of a person who the only reason they're engaged with it is because it's so much in the newer content is so much in their face that they're just mad at the newer content. Would you still say that they're still a part of the community then, or are they just angry, just strictly out of curiosity?
Well, yes, because they still the only reason they get mad is because they care about that original game.
Like they might not be part of that community, but they care enough about games,
right?
So it says like being part of the community is not like what community, like the new gen community, or just because
right. I just figured honestly, it was a variable.
I don't even know if there is a gamer community. There's a bunch of communities that are under the umbrella of gamer, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I just wanted to iron out the last potential controversial variable on that front, just so we have all our bases covered on that topic.
Yeah. Well, so to use that, the counterpoint I was going to make, and this is my main counterpoint against the whole premise that you can keep your gamer identity. I'm just going to come out and say I came to the conclusion when thinking about this discussion that you actually can lose your gamer identity. And despite everything we've talked about so far, the reason I think so is because we have said that it has to be part of a culture or an identity that you share or accept. And there are people who work very hard to remove that or reject that part of themselves. Now, you can talk about this either way, but if you Google search it, and I'll pull it up on the screen for our video. If you Google search it, there are countless videos, courses, companies, discussions, Reddit threads that are just about like, hey, how do I quit gaming? And yes, quitting gaming, there's lots of people who stay addicted. I mentioned Alcoholics Anonymous, where it's like, hello, my name is blank and I'm alcoholic, even though I'm not drinking, because it sticks with you.
I wonder if this is an intervention for me.
But if we say that, if we say that to be a gamer, you have to be able to share that identity with people or yourself. What if you completely reject that identity? Even if it's like you're disposed to go back to being addicted, if you get back into it, if you completely reject that identity and push it away, are you still a gamer or not?
So I do sorry.
Go, Joseph.
I do have a somewhat personal example on that front, because I do, and Adam actually had this friend, although he wasn't there for watching what happened. There was kind of a friend that we had in college who almost kind of fell into that way, where it just mostly because of his girlfriend, then fiance, then the wife. There was a good portion of his time where he was kind of like, because of her, that part of his identity was getting stripped away. And yet, despite all that, eventually there did come a point where he didn't just join Adam and I for a whole semester of Dokapon Kingdom. It actually, like, he thoroughly enjoyed it, and he was big on it, and we were so happy to complete that by the end of the semester. And like, he didn't have much time, and a lot of like, his situation had caused him to want to like push that part of his identity away, but he eventually returned to it. And so I think it's kind of one of those, I do agree that like, if you're actively choosing, you can definitely like reject your gamer identity, but at the same time, like, if you're truly a gamer, once that like seed is planted and incorporated into it, it only you don't really lose the identity so much as like you just reject a portion of yourself for a great portion of your life. Because like there's a difference between being addicted to gaming and like a gamer identity, even though a lot of people treat it as the same. And I think that's like the caveat and problem with like where a lot of those people kind of tend to think.
Yeah, I agree. Because for me, I think I see a lot of people who are into games use it as an escape from reality. And that is their relationship. That is their gamer identity. Their whole identity is founded on, I don't like my life. I'm trying to avoid things, trying to avoid pain. However, not everyone games for that reason. For me, I've always just been genuinely interested in it. And I find it fascinating. So for me, I've never wanted to reject that gamer identity. Now, if your relationship with gaming is very unhealthy, I do think, that's something you should consider. And yeah, because if your only relationship with it is it's hurting you in other aspects in life, or maybe you have different priorities in life, maybe you just don't have time for it. You'd love to do it, but you just don't have time for it. Yeah, you can totally lose your gamer identity. And I will say this, I think it's definitely, I agree that it's definitely possible to lose your gamer identity, because if you couldn't lose it, then it wouldn't mean anything, right? Yeah. Then there's no such thing as being a gamer if you couldn't lose it. But because you can lose it, it is meaningful there. Yeah, because hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, so I hear what you guys are saying, and I kind of go back and forth on this, because obviously we talked about the difference between addiction and identity, and we've already mentioned that
passion's
being a gamer,
huge thing,
Yeah, being a gamer is so much less about
different.
Yeah, well, you can have people who play all hours of the day, and I would say it's still possible for them not to be a gamer, because maybe they do it just to like use up time in their life. Mm-hmm. So it really does come back down to that, like, to what place does it have as a part of your culture and identity, in terms of like passion, pursuit, enjoyment, connecting with others, yourself, and all those things. But though I don't know actually, I do know some people like this where they had that, and because they took it too far, they reject every aspect of it. And there's the whole idea of like, hey, grow up.
Yeah, I've seen that
kind
before
of thing.
Too.
Yeah, and I'm not against people removing games from their life. Far from it.
Yeah.
Like if you want to focus and you feel like that helps you focus on what matters, fantastic. Do that. People should really prioritize things. And games are fun. I think they're a great part of my identity, but I will not say that somebody should be a gamer unless it's something that they just enjoy as a pastime. But I do believe that there are people out there who, in all aspects of it, reject that because of the perspective they start to believe about gaming in their life and what it did to them. And so my conclusion, and I think you guys should also join me in making some sort of conclusion for yourselves, because we have to wrap up here. My personal conclusion is that you can play games and not be a gamer, and you can also not play games and be a gamer, because it's all about what place gaming and gaming culture has in your personal identity, your connection with yourself, others, and interests. But at the end of the day, you have to accept that aspect of your identity, because you could lose your gamer identity if you willingly reject it in all its forms. Somebody who doesn't reject it but just doesn't play anymore, but still could be nostalgic for it or still have conversations about it, I would consider them still a gamer at heart. But I think the only way you could lose it is to completely reject it. Now, what's your guys' conclusion?
Yeah, I mean, so ultimately, I do agree and disagree at is kind of like that thing. Like I would attribute being a gamer to like a core memory, like in from like Inside Out kind of thing, where it's just like it's a part of who you are, and even if you reject it, it's kind of like how at some point in your life, a lot of people just reject the games of tag and hide and seek. But at some point, even further down in your life, most people pick it up again, because as much as it was that kid's game, it's because it was that kid's game that you kind of have to remember, this was part of a simpler time in my life that I just really enjoy and want to come back to. For as long as you fully reject it, you are not. You probably could say you are not a gamer, but I wouldn't define that as losing it, because it's because there's a difference between losing something and intentionally throwing it away, and
Okay.
That's what I would look the way I would like look at it, because even when you throw it away, you actively have to keep throwing it away to once it's a part of who you are.
Final statements, Adam?
So I thought of an analogy. Imagine a vast ocean, and the ocean's name is Gamer Ocean. And your first game that you've played that really hooked you would be you setting sail in Gamer Ocean and landing on an island. For me, that would be Ocarina of Time Island. And once you put your flag there, that part stays with you, right? It's a part of who you are. The only way to lose that is like what you said, is if you take that off, take that out. And however, there are many islands in Gamer Island, and you can put your flag on multiple, on as many as you want to. Some people stop at the first island they go to. And yes, they're still part of they still have a flag in the Gamer Sea above all the vast islands. But it is, if you have the time for it, it can be, a beautiful, enjoyable thing to explore the other islands, see what they have to offer. And a lot of times, if you're someone who hasn't gotten into gaming for a while, haven't played games for a while, I'd really recommend looking at the indie scene, because there's so many different niches there. And the conclusion that I originally wrote down before we had this was we need devs to create a variety of games, because there's so many things that games can do, and I think it's important that we support the ones that we care about. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, we got to wrap up here, but I appreciate you guys' final thoughts. Hopefully you as the audience have enjoyed our discussion today. My question to you is, do you still identify, even if you don't play, or how do you identify? How do you express it these days? Can you lose it? Have you ever lost a different part of your identity? I'd love to hear all those different things. But we'll catch you guys next time on the next episode of the TEG Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. And ciao.